Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping that you are all fine and doing well in this time of pandemic. Best regards to our public schools district supervisor, Dr. Marlon M. Reñeses, and to all the school heads of Gumaca East District. My presentation is entitled Oh My God, which means gender and development in adherence to basic education policies by yours truly. I would like to focus in and zero in on the word adherence. You know, when we say adherence, ang ibig sabihin nito ay yung uh, pagsunod ng masidhi, pagsunod ng tayo ay may matinding pamantayan kagaya ng isang batas. Kaya sa talk na to, pag-uusapan natin ang isang DepEd Order, ang DepEd Order number 32 series of 2017. Ano ba ang sinasabi ng DepEd Order number 32 series of 2017? This is a department order which says that all institutions in DepEd should be gender responsive, and this is in line with gender and development mandate, and this is stipulated in the Philippine Constitution and Republic Act 9710, which is the Magna Carta of Women, which I will be discussing later. This is also anchored on Republic Act 10533 or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. Again, this is also in adherence to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, among others. That is why in DepEd, we are following the child protection policy, wherein all the children inside the school, regardless of their age, their status, are protected by our policies. Again, in this policy, DepEd commits to integrate the principles of gender equality, gender equity, gender sensitivity, non-discrimination, and human rights in the provision and governance of basic education. This is in line with DepEd's mandate to ensure access to quality basic education for all. That is why, if we will be applying for a promotion, we can see that this promotion is intended for all regardless of gender. So malinaw na sinasabi doon na ang mapopromote ay hindi lamang lalaki o babae and other gender preferences. And likewise, this is consistent with DepEd's vision, mission, values, and mandate. So napakalawak ng sinasakop ng DepEd Order na ito. Again, this is also anchored on the SDG, or what we call the Sustainable Development Goal. And this is under SDG 5, which is about gender equality. So, gone were the days na ang mga pinuno, ang mga namumuno sa mga paaralan, sa mga institutions, sa government, ay puro mga lalaki. Nowadays, marami na mga babaeng leader na namumuno, sila na yung mga division superintendents, supervisors, and the like. So, ano sinasabi dito? Goal 5 is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. That is why we should advocate God, because there are so many legal bases pertaining to this matter. Next, the Philippines is committed under international and national law to integrate gender equality into the principles, goals, and processes of the Philippine education. And this is according to the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which says that It shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels and shall take appropriate steps to make education accessible to all. That is under Article 14, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. And it is also included in the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint of 2025, which envisions an inclusive ASEAN that works toward the achievement of gender equality and the elimination of all forms of discrimination and addresses the intersectionality of women's discrimination. And this blueprint would like to protect and empower women, children, youth, the elderly, and persons with disability, including the ethnic minority groups and other vulnerable and marginalized groups. So in our education, in the education system of the Philippines, we have considered the ethnic groups. We have considered the disabled in the sectors of our community. Likewise, the Women's Empowerment, Development, and Gender Equality or Women's EDGE Plan for 2013-2016, which is under its Chapter 6 under Education, which is published by the Philippine Commission on Women, sum up the enduring gender issues in the Philippine education. So there are so many studies pertaining to the empowerment of women. And the first one is boys are underperforming in key education indicators compared to girls. So it is noteworthy to say that girls are performing better in education as compared to girls. So why not empower them if they are good and they have good performance in terms of educating themselves? Next, indigenous peoples fall behind in enrollment data and experience discrimination. So empowering them will help the community and will help their social mobility and improve their lives towards developing themselves. Higher education degrees manifest marked gender segregation. Well, it is not stipulated what is the percentage in terms of discrepancy, but there is marked segregation, marked gender segregation in terms of higher education rate. Next, gender biases and stereotypes remain and are still embedded in the curricula, instructional methods, materials, and learning media. So, ngayon, ang mga gumagawa ng mga learning material should be sensitive in terms of preparing these learning activity sheets, these modules in terms of gender issues and biases. So women and girls continue to be vulnerable to sexual harassment and violence inside schools. I am a member of the fact-finding investigation of the Division of Quezon, and still there are many prevailing cases involving sexual harassments and violence inside schools. And this proves that we really need to advocate God and to help these poor victims of sexual harassments and violence in schools. And that is why we are doing this gender awareness and development training in order to empower ourselves, in order to help our co-workers and our students protect themselves and know their rights and privileges. The results of the 2016 National Baseline Study on Violence Against Children by the Council for the Welfare of Children and the Systematic Literature Review on the Drivers of Violence Affecting Children by the United Nations Children's Fund or the UNICEF show that, number one, there is a high prevalence of violence against children among both boys and girls, and increasingly more boys are becoming victims of sexual abuse than girls. So dati sinasabi yung mga lalaki, usually they are the perpetrators, they are the bully. But now, this study is showing that boys are also becoming victims of sexual abuse. Next, sexual harassment is the most frequent form of sexual violence, with girls being particularly vulnerable. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender or the LGBT youth are also at risk of sexual violence committed by their peers. Take note, these are happening inside the school. LGBT children are at higher risk for physical and psychological bullying. Children's previous experiences of violence drive violent behavior in schools. So according to psychology, yung mga victim, when they can see opportunity to take revenge, to avenge of what happened to them, they as victims are now the perpetrators, they are now the bully, and we would like to take an end to this chain of violence and of course end these happenings inside the school. Next, despite the high prevalence of violence, disclosures are reported to be low. However, teachers are the most common persons children disclose to and sought help from. As such, teachers and school personnel need to have appreciation and understanding of children's rights. So it is good to know that we, the teachers and school personnel, are the one who can help these children who suffered violence, who suffered bullying and other forms of sexual violence committed against them. So take note that in terms of these disclosures reported to us, we should take note that we should consider the confidentiality of these cases. This policy also provides the guidelines for gender-responsive basic education that shall allow DepEd to integrate the principles of gender equality, gender equity, gender sensitivity, non-discrimination, and human rights in the provision and governance of basic education. So through this policy, DepEd commits to gender equality through gender-responsive basic education to holistically develop Filipinos with access to quality, culture-based basic education and a learner-friendly, safe, and nurturing environment with the provision to continuously improve its support systems at all levels of governance. So, it specifically aims to promote inclusive education that ensures girls and boys and women's and men's equal access to learning opportunities, fair treatment in the learning process, and equitable outcomes, as well as access to opportunities in all spheres of life. So when we provide modules to our students, we should not say, unahin na yung mga babae because these are girls, ladies first. So we should ensure that we are following equality and equity among our students. Next, we should promote the protection of children against all forms of gender-based violence, abuse, discrimination, and bullying in schools. That is why in every schools, meron tayong tinatawag na intake sheet, which is the proper forum on how to address and how to report violences and bullying inside the school. Next, we should also address gender-based barriers and the different forms of discrimination as a result of being exposed to gender inequality suffered by the vulnerable and marginalized groups. This includes taking affirmative steps where necessary to reduce gender gaps and disparities in basic education, and rectifying through affirmative action such discrimination suffered by gender group in the workplace as a result of treatment that fails to recognize gender differences and thus adversely affects that gender group. And these are the suggestions: adopting gender-sensitive promotion standards that give due consideration to women's absence from the workplace on account of maternity leave. So that is one example. Involve all learners, teachers, and non-teaching personnel and other stakeholders in the promotion of gender equality and non-discrimination through their engagement in the curriculum, learning materials, teaching methodologies, and support services that should not only aim at eliminating gender stereotypes but also at transforming gender relations toward empowerment and social change. So through this seminar, through trainings, and through our continuous education, we can say that little by little, we are empowering ourselves. And through empowering ourselves, we can promote social change. So as we go home, as we become father to our children, and husbands to our wife, or wife to our husbands, and as mothers to our children, we can practice non-discrimination. We can practice this loving care that should be given to our families, to our students, and to our children. We should also strengthen the structures, systems, and methodologies that promote coordination to address gender dimensions in planning, information exchange, design, and delivery of services. So, pag ba nagpaplano tayo, sinasabi natin na, oh, tayo na lang mga lalaki, we can do that because this task is supposedly using manpower. But why not include women? They might have some suggestions and strategies that will work as well. So that is for planning. And for information exchange, there might be women who are more knowledgeable than men. That is why we should consider not being biased in terms of exercising our ability to plan and to execute the delivery of services within DepEd. Next, we should ensure that public and private partners are fully oriented to adopt gender equality standards and procedures in program implementation and management. So if our stakeholder will say, okay, we will be donating shirts for all the teachers. Teka po, in our school we have 27 female employees and teachers and 14 male. Baka kasi ang ipadala yung mga t-shirt na puro pang lalaki. Meron naman pala tayong mga kasama ng mga babae sa school. Okay? So that is why we should be conscious and aware in considering that there should be no gender biases in terms of our program implementation, in terms of our planning, and how we plan to achieve our goals. Next, we should continuously enhance policy implementation and sustainability of results through periodic reviews, consultations with stakeholders, documentation, and promotion of good practices. Sometimes we are doing good practices which are only within our school, and there are what we call the practices such as benchmarking and sharing of best practices. So just like in a school where they are empowering women, they are teaching women to defend themselves, they are being taught how to do martial arts, how to learn basic self-defense, and why not explore sharing these ideas, these best practices to other schools so that all women in the district, in the division, in the national level will be empowered. So these are promotion of good practices. So the DepEd, through the appropriate and relevant unit, shall, number one, consider learners' development and advocate gender equality in all aspects of development, and ensures that programs, projects, and activities are made congruent with this policy, and it should be included specifically sa school improvement plan and annual implementation plan. So don't forget to include GAD activities. Include in the school calendar the observance and celebration of GAD activities such as Women's Month, which is celebrated on March, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month on June, Breastfeeding Month, August, Peace Education Month, September, Child's Month, November. So, pagdating pala ng November, we should consider celebrating Children's Month, 18-day campaign for End Violence Against Women, that is from November 25 to December 12, and the Human Rights Month on the month of December. So, we should have a plan of activities in order to celebrate these activities. And in doing such, we are also promoting gender awareness in development within the school and within the community. Next, in terms of curriculum standards, we should enhance and promote a K-12 curriculum that integrates gender equality, human rights, sexuality and reproductive health education, peace education, environmental studies, and child protection. Next, develop a set of gender awareness and development and human rights competencies, including but not limited to core messages and key concepts such as responsible parenthood, equal opportunities, equal representation in public affairs, including the NGO, the bureaucracy, electoral politics, and business, to be integrated across learning areas and across grade levels. You know, in a curriculum, when we say the curriculum is spiral in approach, we cannot say that it is basically spiral if we are talking about sciences, wherein it starts from the not so difficult up to the very difficult concept. But when we say it is integrated and it is spiral, all the subjects are interrelated. So if we will be teaching sciences, then we will be teaching about chromosomes. That when we say that a sperm cell can produce male or female if the male has X and Y chromosome, that is in terms of sciences. Why not include this in your social studies, that in terms of population, the distribution of male and female may be attributed to this genetics factor. And in terms of the language use, we can also say that there are differences in terms of how men and women use their language. So these are things that we can explore in terms of developing the curriculum standards and interrelating them, and in saying that, well, our curriculum is spiral in approach. We should ensure minimum standards on gender sensitivity that will be integrated in the subjects or learning areas, trainings, curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular programs for learners and trainees. So if we will be doing trainings and curricular and other co-curricular activities within the school, we should always advocate GAD, and we should strike a balance between attaining our objectives and in giving God attributes to our trainings and our standards in doing such. For the learning delivery, which is of course our main job, why we are here in DepEd, and that is part mostly, especially of the school heads, which is composed of the 70% instructional supervision, is to ensure that all public and private schools, learning centers, including laboratory schools of state universities and colleges, local universities, local colleges shall maintain gender-responsive instructional delivery and services. So considering that there are student teachers that will be coming to schools, especially nung wala pang pandemic, this thing should also be advocated to them, and this thing should be taught to them. Design gender-responsive models of instruction for basic education appropriate for all types of learners. So, yung module sa PE, yung learning activity sheet sa PE, hindi pwedeng sabihin na basketball is for girls, but we should say that basketball is also intended for men and women, including other sports. Formulate enabling policies and guidelines for the implementation of gender-responsive, innovative teaching and learning approaches and assessment models for basic education aligned with curriculum standards. Okay? I have been an automotive teacher for a long time, and I have been observing that even female students are also good in automotive. They have these adept skills for scrutinizing and for looking at parts, and that they are also keen into assembly, into electronics, and other related aspects of technical vocational education. That is why hindi natin pwedeng minosin na, babae, dapat hindi ka nag-welding, dapat hindi ka nag-automotive. They have their set of skills and they are talented in what they are doing as far as I have observed and as far as I have experienced. And even today, at this moment, Japan and other countries would like to recruit female automotive technician and female welders. And that is reported by TESDA also. And provide technical assistance to field offices in the adoption or modification of gender-responsive learning models and strategies. I think in Quezon, in DepEd Quezon, we have an organization promoting gender and development activities within the division and across schools. For the learning environment, ensure a gender-responsive physical and social learning environment that promotes respect for all people and has zero tolerance for all forms of discrimination, violence, and abuse. Ensure that DepEd personnel are properly oriented and trained on gender equality, sexuality, reproductive health education, human rights, peace education, and child protection. I know there is what we call teacher induction program, personnel induction program, and these things are being taught to new employees. So there are no reasons to say that, well, I am not taught on these processes. We have these induction programs for teachers and employees across DepEd. And as far as the school head should also be responsible in promoting and advocating and in educating teachers and personnel in this gender awareness and development practices. Next, ensure that development and capacity building through in-service trainings and workshops in coordination with the NAEAP or the National Educators Academy of the Philippines and relevant private education institutions are aligned with all the human rights education and peace education within the school. And it is also anchored on GRBE, or the Gender Rights Based Education. Next, for the learning environment also, promote the institutionalization of gender responsive teaching learning plans, guides, processes, activities, and mechanisms and measures. So if you will be doing an activity, let's say a science activity, consider not being biased. So let's say the activity will say that let your female classmate observe what's happening in the chemical reaction. Well, that's wrong. So because you are pointing out that only female or only the male student can observe. So these are basic tenets in terms of the processes, in terms of the learning plans and activities within the school. And then, provide adequate and responsive capacity building activities for teachers in dealing with children in conflict with the law and children at risk. So maybe on the next GAD plan, include, or LAC session, include how to handle children in conflict with the law and children at risk. These are topics which are sensitive, or if not, look for experts in the field that will discuss these matters, this topic to the school. And access to experts is not difficult in this time of pandemic. We can simply PM them and set a Zoom meeting with this expert, and voila, we have a training and teachers and personnel are capacitated. I also appreciate these platforms wherein a recorded video can be sent to anyone, and not just for a particular audience but for a wider audience. So that's the power of technology. Before, if you will be talking to a certain group of 50 to 100 people, well, they are the only one who listened, who learned from an expert's talk. But now, if you upload this to YouTube, if you do a TikTok, you're doing your talk, your lecture to a wide audience, not just to 1,000 but to 1,000,000 audience. Strengthen and sustain the capacity of administrators, guidance counselors, and teachers in handling cases of violence, abuse, discrimination, exploitation, and bullying, and equip them with the technical competence in providing appropriate interventions and immediate referral. So if a bullying incident happened inside the school, what should you do? How will you report that? What interventions will you do to the students, the victims? These are questions which are basic, and these are included in the child protection policy of DepEd. For the learning resources, develop and provide gender-responsive learning resources based on the revision programs, curriculum, social content guidelines, and other references to ensure that learning resources are free from gender biases, stereotypes, and use gender-fair and inclusive language, positive images, and messages. So if you will be a module writer, consider these things. Why not, in your example, use a balance between Jose, Juana, Pedro, and that is gender sensitive, and include pictures of male, female, And in your examples, consider inclusive language and positive images and messages. Ito rin, ensure that writers, editors, evaluators, layout artists, illustrators, and focal persons of learning resources are well trained on gender responsiveness, sexuality, reproductive health education, human rights, and peace education. So why not in doing graphics on counting? If you will be using guns, well, it's better to use roses, diba? So all of us appreciate roses. So provide orientation for prospective publishing and development teams to emphasize the inclusion of GAD key concepts and core messages in learning resource development. And we should also provide GAD learning resources and update the guidelines in the development of learning resources by reinforcing social content guidelines with GAD core messages and concept, and modifying instructional design framework including GAD core messages and concepts as permanent elements of instructional design in all printed learning resources, and ensure that learning resources procured from external sources comply with GAD key concepts and core messages. So if we will be buying books, we will be using instructional materials from external sources, consider critiquing them first before using. That is why as a school head, I am also advising my co-teachers to please check the content of a video lesson to be presented to the students or to be sent to the students. These videos might have contents which are not gender sensitive, or it might include violence or other pornographic images that might be seen by the students. So take note of that. As teachers, we should consider checking all the materials from start to finish, because we will be liable for doing such. Update and align the quality assurance of the learning resources, evaluation instruments, and instructional materials to include gender concepts, values, and gender-fair language. Ito pa, gather and upload quality-assured GAD learners and teachers resources to the DepEd Learning Resources portal. That is why a school should consider quality-assured materials. And in doing so, the school can have a learning resource bank to be used in the teaching learning process. And of course, we all know this, that field offices shall implement contextualized, localized, indigenized learning resources integrating GAD core messages and key concepts. That is why we should advocate GAD. In terms of assessment, which is a very important factor in terms of educating our students, ensure that formative and summative assessments at the school level and any competitions including contests and quiz bees at any level are gender responsive and culture sensitive for all learners, teachers, and concerned personnel. Include also GAD core messages and key concepts in test development, specifically in the table of specifications as integrated in the learning competencies using gender-fair language. Conduct a GAD orientation for test items writers to ensure educational assessments are gender-related based activities compliant in terms of content and procedures. And of course, enjoin all public and private accrediting institutions or organizations to include gender equality elements in their accreditation criteria. So, in terms of assessment, we should consider these things. For school health, which is very critical in this time of pandemic, provide policy standards and guidelines for the integrated health and nutrition program and capacitate teaching and non-teaching personnel in the implementation of nutrition support programs, school health service delivery, and provision of a healthy school environment. So if we will be doing a nutrition program, why not consider everybody? Why not only consider the male population? So if the men are doing basketball, why consider women doing volleyball? Or you can do a mix of activities for all of this gender. Next, ensure that all schools, learning centers, and workplaces promote mental health and psychological support services related with gender-related base education. Ensure enforcement of public and private schools implementation and compliance with Republic Act 9710 on non-expulsion of women faculty and female learners who become pregnant outside of marriage. Women who became pregnant outside of marriage are also considered in their leave privileges, specifically on the public school system. And of course, I know the private sector is also doing these things. Implement girl, child, adolescent, and sexual and reproductive health services in every school. Conduct regular focus group discussion or youth forums and activities on health and nutrition issues as extracurricular or co-curricular activities. We may not conduct a focus group discussion in terms of face-to-face intervention, but we can also conduct focus group discussion virtually for those students within our reach, specifically if they have a strong internet connection. And through this, we can learn from them and we can get their voices. So what are their aspirations? How are they doing? And these are very good practices so that we can also address their needs. We can address their problems, specifically on mental health. Napakarami po ng mga estudyante natin ngayon na mga nade-depress, bumibigay, and I think these students need support, not just physically but also mentally. And as teachers, we can be the source of moral support in terms of helping them get through this very difficult situation. Next, develop information, education, and communication materials on issues for learners in need of special attention. Nagdaan yung Teacher's Day, and we can say that our students remembered us by sending us messages, by sending us greetings. And it is noteworthy to say that these students always remembered us not for the subjects we taught, not for the mathematical formula, not for the chemical equation, not for the capitals and countries, not for the nouns and pronouns that we have taught them, but they will remember us for being a good teacher, for being a caring and loving teacher to them. So it is important to give special attention to these students with needs, with special needs. But of course, consider intervention for everyone. There was a professor from the University of the Philippines who's always advocating that when you do a research, when you do a certain intervention, and when you give this to the underprivileged, why not give the intervention also to the privileged? Or if this group of people are underprivileged and there is a certain group who's given such intervention, why not give also the intervention to that underprivileged group so that there is equality, there is balance, even though the research is finished, although the research was concluded. Tama nga naman. So, in the school sector, why not give interventions to everyone? For the youth formation, formulate and recommend implement policies for youth development with gender rights-based education in coordination with the National Youth Commission. So, kaya tayo sa mga schools, meron tayong youth formation coordinator. Conduct capacity building on youth development aligned with gender rights-based education. And activate, mobilize youth organizations in all public and private schools, including laboratory schools, SUCs, LUCs, to ensure non-discrimination of learners in youth membership. Equal treatment and opportunities to females and males for academic honors, leadership in school or class organizations, journalistic endeavors, and the like. So, malapit na naman yung SSG election at always consider gender balance. So, bakit parang ang mga kandidato dito puro lalaki? Why not recruit the female population so that there will be a balance? So, just like in the Philippine politics, it's good to note that there are female candidates and there are male candidates. So, representation of the youth in recognized activities of DepEd. And of course, implement career guidance and counseling programs and activities that give learners career choices and options aligned with gender rights-based education. And it is also stipulated that we should advocate GAD for school sports, which formulate, recommend, and implement policies on sports development aligned with Republic Act 9710, Section 14, which is Women in Sports. So, we are so proud of Heidelin Diaz being the first woman to win the Olympic gold medal. Why not produce another Heidelin Diaz? Okay? So, these are important and these are milestone in Philippine sports. And as an educator, we should think of, yes, it's correct that women in sports is a key thing to consider. Conduct capacity building for sports development aligned with the Republic Act 9710, Section 14, which is Women in Sports. So I was once also a coach in Taekwondo when I was a classroom teacher. And it's good to note that Taekwondo has male and female participants. Unlike boxing, I know boxing as this and later on napatigil. And I don't know if it's continuing right now, but in the international arena, we can see that female mixed martial artist, yung UFC, UFC, URCC, have female counterparts. Although these are mixed martial arts, but in all other sports, we can see a balance between male and female athlete, including basketball, volleyball, soccer, and other ball games. Next, ensure gender-responsive implementation of sports programs and activities. And I know across the division, across the region, and in DepEd, we are being gender-responsive for our sports program. Planning. Sabi nga, ang laging paalala sa atin, if we are planning, consider everybody as part of a group, as part of those who will take part in programs, projects, and activities. Gather and analyze sex disaggregated data and gender information for informed decision making. So, ilan ba yung mga girls natin? Ilan ba yung member ng LGBTQ? So, these things should also be considered in the planning aspect. Monitor the implementation of the basic education research agenda, specifically its GAD component. Yan. So, a sound planning is based on sound research. And we are always saying that in research, the output of the research is based on a conclusion. It's based on a solid data. Ensure that policies and studies being reviewed by the service are aligned with this policy. So that is why we should advocate GAD, because DepEd would like to see a gender-based rights education within schools, within division, within the region, and within the national level. So let's proceed to one of GAD's legal basis, which is Republic Act 9262, which is the Anti-VAWC Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004. So madali lang tandaan, 9262. Okay? It's easy to remember. So Republic Act 9262, which is the Anti-VAWC Law. So what is RA 9262? It is the Violence Against Women and Their Children Law, which refers to, let us define violence against women and their children first. Refers to any act or a series of acts committed by any person against a woman or against her child, whether legitimate or illegitimate, within or without the family abode, which result in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering or economic abuse. Well, that is very self-explanatory. And let's proceed to the next one. Women. Women refers to the wife, the former wife, one with whom the person has or had a dating or sexual relationship, and one with whom he has a common child. So this is the definition of women according to Republic Act 9262. The child. The child is a person below 18 years of age or older, but who is unable to fully take care of himself, herself from abuse, neglect, cruelty, exploitation, or discrimination because of a physical or mental disability or condition. That is the meaning of the child in Republic Act 9262. So what are the act or acts which constitute violence against women and their children? Number 1, it's physical violence, which refers to acts that include bodily or physical harm. It includes causing, threatening, attempting to cause physical harm to the woman or her child. So that is physical violence. And we are bombarded with physical violence news on the television, on the internet, and other things that became viral on social media. Next is sexual violence, which refers to an act which is sexual in nature, like rape, sexual harassment, acts of lasciviousness, treating a woman or her child as a sex object, forcing the wife and mistress lover to live in the conjugal home or sleep together in the same room with the abuser, forcing the woman or her child to watch indecent shows or do indecent acts, or prostituting the woman or child. So these things are self-explanatory and we will not discuss this in details since it is specifically stipulated in Republic Act 9262. How about psychological violence? So as I read, try to imagine that, this is really an abuse. Refers to acts causing mental or emotional suffering of the victim like intimidation, harassment, stalking, peering in the window, or lingering outside the residence of the woman or her child, entering or remaining on the property of the woman or her child against his or her will, destroying the property, public ridicule or humiliation, repeated verbal abuse and marital infidelity, or unlawful or unwanted deprivation of the right to custody and or visitation of common children. This includes these things under psychological violence. So yan, very common: intimidation, harassment, stalking. Yan. Economic abuse refers to acts that make a woman financially dependent, like withdrawal of financial support or preventing the victim from engaging in any legitimate profession, occupation, or business deprivation, or threat of deprivation of financial resources and the right to the use of enjoyment of their property, controlling the victim's own money or properties, or solely controlling the conjugal money or properties. So the woman has been deprived of the use of his or her money. So that is economic abuse. So remedies of the offended party: can file a petition for a protection order, file a criminal action for violation of anti-violence against women, file a criminal action with reservation of a separate civil action, or file a civil action for damages. So how to do this, and what are these? So when we say protection order, it is an order issued for the purpose of preventing or safeguarding further acts of violence against a woman or her child. So minimizing any disruption in the victim's daily life and facilitating the opportunity and ability of the victim to independently regain control over her life. So when you are being psychologically molested, when these things are happening to you, you need to be protected, and a protection order is an intervention to prevent these things so that you can independently do your thing and regain control over your life. So what are the kinds of protection order? There are three. So the first one is Barangay Protection Order, or the BPO, which is issued by the punong barangay, the barangay captain, or in his or her absence, the barangay kagawad, ordering the perpetrator to desist from or causing threatening to cause physical harm or bodily injury against the offended party, and this is effective for 15 days. Temporary protection order. This is issued by the court on the day of the filing of application or in the course of hearing, effective for 30 days. Next is permanent protection order, issued by the court after notice and hearing, and effective until revoked by the court upon application of the person in whose favor the order was issued. So these are protection order. So what are the reliefs granted under the protection order? So prohibition from committing or threatening to commit acts of violence. So you are protected. Prohibition from harassing, annoying, telephoning, contacting, or communicating with petitioner. So no communication. Removal or exclusion of respondent from residence of petitioner regardless of ownership of the residence, either temporarily or permanently. So removal, exclusion of the petitioner, kahit siya pa yung may-ari ng bahay. Directing respondent to stay away from the residence, school, place of employment of petitioner or designated family or household member. So in order of the court, you should stay away. So if you are the respondent. directing lawful possession and use by petitioner of an automobile and other essential personal effects regardless of ownership. Ayan. Granting a temporary or permanent custody of a children to petitioner. So, the petitioner will be given the permanent or temporary custody to the child or to the child or children. Directing respondent to provide support to the women or her child if entitled to legal support. So take note, the respondent shall provide support for the women and for the child if there is any. And prohibition to use, possess any firearm or deadly weapon and to surrender the same to the court, including revocation of license and disqualification to apply for license. Of course, this is to protect the petitioner in terms of any aggression or violence that might be committed to the petitioner as done by the respondent. Siyempre, dapat walang baril or any deadly weapon. Who may file for petition for protection order? The offended party, of course, the parents or the guardian, ascendants, descendants, and other relatives, a social worker, police officer, punong barangay or kagawad, a lawyer, counselor or therapist, or two concerned and responsible citizens. And where to apply? BPO, the Barangay Protection Order, of course in the barangay where the parties reside or where the respondent resides. Temporary protection order or permanent protection order, of course in the family court where the petitioner resides, if none, in the regional trial court, metropolitan trial court, municipal trial court in cities, and municipal trial courts where the petitioner resides. So what are the penalties under Republic Act 9262 for causing physical harm to the woman or her child if constituting attempted, prostrated, or consummated parricide or murder or homicide or mutilation, to be punished in accordance with the provision of the revised penal code if constituting serious physical injuries, penalty of prison mayor. So matagal-tagal na pagkakakulong. If constituting less serious physical injuries, punished by prison correctional, and if constituting slight physical injuries, punished by arresto mayor. So for the penalties, threatening to cause the woman or her child physical harm, imprisonment of 2 degrees lower than the prescribed penalty for the consummated crime, which shall in no case be lower than arresto mayor. Attempting to cause the woman or her child physical harm, punished by arresto mayor, and placing the woman or her child in fear of imminent physical harm, punished by arresto mayor. So other penalties include attempting to compel the woman or her child to engage in conduct which he or she has the right to desist from, conduct which the woman or her child has the right to engage in. So basically, the women are being protected. Next, Republic Act 9710, and I think this is the last legal basis which I include in this talk. So there are three, of course. We have the DepEd Order, the Republic Act 9262, and Republic Act 9710, which is the Magna Carta for Women or the Magna Carta of Women. The Magna Carta of Women is a comprehensive women's human rights law that seeks to eliminate discrimination against women by recognizing, protecting, fulfilling, and promoting the rights of Filipino women, especially those in the marginalized sectors. Take note of the word marginalized sectors. These are the women in our periphery. Sila yung mga nasa laylayan ng lipunan. Republic Act 9710. And for Chapter 1, the general provision states that universal and inalienable, all human beings are free and equal in dignity and rights. So, indivisible, inherent to the dignity of every human being, whether in civil, cultural, economic, political, or social issues. Interdependent and interrelated, the fulfillment of one right often depends wholly or in part upon the fulfillment of others. All individuals are equal as human beings by virtue of the inherent dignity of each human person. And Republic Act 9710 is a rights-based approach principle. Let us define the terms used in Republic Act 9710. Defines discrimination against women in accordance with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. So any gender-based distinction, exclusion, or restriction which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women irrespective of their marital status on the basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. So this includes political, economic, social, cultural. So these are important factors in the lives of women. So any act or omission, including by law, policy, administrative measure, or practice that directly or indirectly excludes or restricts women in the recognition and promotion of their rights and their access to and enjoyment of opportunities, benefits, or privileges. And a measure or practice of general application that fails to provide for mechanisms to offset or address sex or gender-based disadvantages or limitations of women. And lastly is discrimination compounded by or intersecting with other grounds, status, or condition such as ethnicity, age, poverty, or religion. So these are the rights and empowerment under the Magna Carta of Women. So take note of this. The number one is the right to protection from violence. So we all know that even now, women are still suffering from violence, and to protect them, we have Republic Act 9710, which says that within 5 years, incremental increase in the recruitment and training of women in the police force, forensics and medical legal services, social work services availed of by women victims of gender-related offenses until 50% are women. So they are the priority. So since 50% of them should be women. Protection and security in situations of armed conflict and militarization. So in places where there are armed conflict and militarization, so women and children should be the one to be protected, and they should be immediately evacuated and placed to safer grounds. So mandatory human rights and gender sensitivity training for all government personnel involved in the protection and defense of women against gender-based violence. So trainings and gender sensitivity training should be conducted. Usually, after these interventions, there are also post-interventions so that women and children can cope with their new lives after suffering from such violence and other traumatic experiences. And also, try to check if in your barangay they have violence against women desk aside from the VAWC in police precincts within the country. Next, under 9710, women have the right to protection and security in times of disasters, calamities, and other crisis situations. The focus, all phases of relief, recovery, rehabilitation, and construction efforts, including protection from sexual exploitation. So it's so sad to note that during this time of crisis, the women are the one who's been exploited since they are vulnerable, and Sometimes they are using their own body and being exploited in terms of prostitution. So sometimes the main reason is to feed their families and to cope with these challenges in terms of financial instability. So women also have the right to participation and representation, which includes undertaking temporary special measures and affirmative actions to accelerate and ensure women's equitable participation and representation in third level civil service. So that is a 50-50 gender balance. Development councils and planning bodies wherein 40% should be women, international bodies, political parties, private sector, and other policy and decision-making bodies. So women should also be represented in other policy and decision-making bodies, and review of policies on recruitment and selection, qualifying examination, assignments of posts and missions. So they have the right to participate and represent themselves. So it is noteworthy to say that these are followed in DepEd per se. So women also have the right to equal treatment before the law, which requires review, if necessary, amendment, or repeal laws that are discriminatory to women within 3 years from the effectivity of the Family Code of the Philippines. Yan. Revised Penal Code, Labor Code of the Philippines. I just placed there the specific article. So if you would like to browse and see the provisions intended thereto. So Labor Code of the Philippines on night work provision. So cited yan, Article 30 of the Labor Code. So yung may mga night shift specifically sa mga production area, sa mga industries. Yan. So Republic Act 1853, which is the removal of the criminal liability of rapist when victim marries him. And there are certain provisions within the law which you can read and understand based on Republic Act 9710. So ito yung mga legal provisions which emanates from Republic Act 9710. So we have also the right to equal access and elimination of discrimination in education, scholarships, and training. So hindi pwede ngayon na scholarships, training, and the right to be promoted or the right to be included in profiling and other let's say criteria for joining a development in terms of your status is being discriminated if you are a woman. So we have the use of gender-sensitive language and revision of gender stereotypes and images in educational materials and curricula. Encouraging enrollment of women in non-traditional skills training in vocational and tertiary levels, which I have, I think, cited as a sample. Nasabi ko nga, women in technical and vocational education are excelling, outlawing the expulsion and non-readmission of women faculty due to pregnancy outside of marriage. Ayan. So, kahit yan ay nabuntis, even outside of marriage, they should be given admission to their education, to a university degree or to a college degree. Prohibiting schools from turning out or refusing admission to a female student solely on the account of her having contracted pregnancy outside of marriage during her term in school. So nakakalungkot na there are schools who are doing this, and this limits the social mobility of women to to be promoted and to go on with their life. So sayang, dapat nakatapos, nakapagbuo ng magandang pamilya at nagkaroon ng economic stability. The right to equal participation in sports. So take note, again, my sample is Heidelin Diaz. Measures to ensure that gender-based discrimination in competitive and non-competitive sports is removed so that women and girls can benefit from sports development. Right from non-discriminatory and non-derogatory portrayal in media, non-discriminatory and non-derogatory portrayal of women in media and film to raise the consciousness of the general public in recognizing the dignity of women and their role and the contribution in the family, community, and society through the strategic use of mass media. So, try to advocate the use of mass media and the use of social media for the non-discrimination and non-derogatory portrayal of women in media. So, di ba ngayon, it's good to note that social media platforms have this domain for report. So you can report any misuse, any abuse of social media platforms. That is one way to see that community guidelines are being followed. So that is one best practice. And if you are a person who don't want to commit a sin of omission, sabi nga kasi in our lives we have two things na malimit na ginagawang kasalanan. It can be a sin of commission. Commission, yung talagang ikaw yung gumawa, ikaw yung nagkasala. Talagang ikaw mismo. But a sin of omission is a thing that hindi ko to pwedeng palampasin. I should do something. So, being a concerned citizen, we are trying to say that you will not commit a sin of omission because you have reported this discrimination, you have reported these abuses. So take note of that as teachers, as administrators, as members of the community. We should be conscientious of what we are doing. We should be conscientious of what others are doing. And try not to commit this sin of omission so that there will be change, so that VAWC, so that GAD is being advocated. So, next is right to health. Marami. Isa-isahin natin. Maternal care, promotion of breastfeeding, ethical, legal, safe, and effective methods of family planning, family and state collaboration in youth sexuality education and health services, reproductive tract cancers, STI, HIVs, and AIDS, prevention of abortion and management of pregnancy-related complications, violence against women, infertility and sexual dysfunctions, care of elderly women, mental health management, treatment, and interventions. And this also includes yung mga vaccination program na given to women. That's why kino-consider din yung mga buntis priority yan. Okay? Because they have the right to health. Ito pa, comprehensive health information and education on all aspects of women's health prepared to in paragraph A for women in all sectors with due regard to age-appropriate adolescent health and sexuality education for parents, program for the elderly women, training for health service providers, educators toward gender-responsive, culture-sensitive, and non-discriminatory and non-judgmental behaviors and attitudes, health and sexuality education, and counseling available in teen centers. So why not introduce this to your students? Why not do sexuality education for parents? So we know in the Philippines, it's a taboo. Medyo hindi comfortable ang mga parents, ang mga bata if we will be talking about their sexuality, about sex education. So it is very high time that we are discussing this and try to consider doing training and education, educating our parents and our students as well. We have also under Republic Act 9710 the right to special leave benefits. 2 months with full pay based on gross monthly compensation for women employees who undergo surgery caused by gynecological disorders, provided that they have rendered continuous aggregate employment service for at least 6 months for the last 12 months. So this is under Republic Act 9710. Equal rights in all matters relating to marriage and family relations. The state shall ensure the same rights of women and men to enter into and leave marriages, freely choose a spouse, and to enter into marriage only with their free and full consent, decide on the number and spacing of their children, enjoy personal rights including choice of profession, own, acquire, and administer their property, and acquire, change, or retain their nationality. Women also have the right to food, security, and productive resources. So equal status between men and women in the titling of the land and issuance of contracts and patents, and the filing, acceptance, processing, and approval of land applications, particularly for the Emancipation Patent and Certificate of Land Ownership Award, or the CLOA. Certificate of stewardship shall be issued in the name of both spouses. Yan. Localized, accessible, secure, and affordable housing. So, hindi na uso yung paternal culture na ang titulo ng mga ari-arian ay nakapangalan sa lalaki. And of course, the right to decent work, which include the right to support services and gears to protect women from occupational and health hazards, taking into account their maternal functions, support services that will enable work and family life balance, union membership. So, if a company is being unionized, female members of the establishment or a company does not exclude women. They can be leaders, they can be members of a certain union. Respect for the observance of indigenous cultural practices even in the workplace. So, sa UP system, pag graduation, okay yung nakabahag. There is no, because that is their culture. And I think also in DepEd, 'di ba? Yung mga mga kapatid natin na mga Muslim, they can wear their traditional dress. The law also mandates to ensure decent work standards for women that involve the creation of jobs of acceptable quality and conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. And I am happy to say that in the industry sector, the private sector are doing their best to promote ergonomic standards in terms of their workplace and exert efforts to create local employment and other economic opportunities to address out migration. Okay, so women are given the opportunities for local employment. Before I work in the industry sector, I work in Mitsubishi Motors, and during that time, I can see that these industries are not really biased in terms of employment. So if you will be riding a bus going to Laguna Technopark, you can see a mix of male and female employees entering the premises. So noong una, during the industrial time, it's women who stayed sa bahay and men go to the industry to iron and metal manufacturing plants. They are the ones working on the mining sector, and women are but it is different now. Minsan nga, mas madami pa yung mga babae na production operators. Mas marami pa yung mga babae na mga supervisors. And the reason is that, according to research, is that they are more meticulous in terms of observing and identifying problems of electronic products. So women also have the right to livelihood, credit, capital, and technology, which is formulate and implement policies, plans, and programs to give women easy access to capital and credit for business enterprises. So in the Philippines, we can see many women entrepreneur. So, 'di ba, nag-boom na dati yung mga Avon, nag-boom yung mga Natasha, and all other businesses owned by women. Ensure availability of trainings and capacity building programs for women, potential entrepreneurs, and ensure provisions of support services. And ensure the integration of returning women migrant workers into the labor force. Women also have the right to social protection because they have their SSS and PhilHealth to support indigenous and community-based social protection schemes and institutionalization of policies and programs that seek to reduce the poverty and vulnerability to risk and enhance the social status and right of the marginalized women. The state is also mandated to endeavor to reduce and eventually eliminate transfer cost of remittances and provide access to investment opportunities for remittances in line with national development efforts. So ngayon uso na yung mga money transfer, may mga GCash, may mga Western Union, and dati pag magkapadala ka, it will take time and the charges were very high. It's very exorbitant. So establish health insurance program for senior citizens and indigents. And of course, women are given their choices in terms of health insurance program. Specifically in families where the husband or family members are supportive. Support women with disabilities and a community-based social protection scheme. Next, women have the right to participate in peace and development. So if you will be looking into Republic Act 9710 under the Magna Carta of Women, women will come to realize that I have this so many rights and privileges. Participation in discussions and decision making in the peace process. So inclusion of women's concerns in the peace agenda. So if women will represent a certain group, she can represent his or her group for peace talks. Consideration for the specific needs of women and girls in the protection of civilians in conflict affected communities, which I have also cited as an example on my earlier discussion. And inclusion of peace perspective in education curriculum. So remember there was a DepEd order which says that school should put a signage that says this school is a zone of peace. This school is a zone of peace. That means na the school should be free of armed conflict and other violence existing within the school. So recognition and support for women's role in conflict preventions, management, and resolution and peacemaking and indigenous systems of conflict resolution. So if there will be a dialogue for indigenous people and for management of conflicts and or resolution, this activity should be represented well by women. So this is my last slide, which is the institutional mechanism for the establishment and incentives of award systems. The funding, 5% of GAD budget to be utilized for programs and activities for the Magna Carta of Women. And this is also under Republic Act 9184, which says that 5% of the annual MOOE should be used for GAD training, which I think we are doing right now. So I would like to thank all of you for listening and for watching this video, and I hope you learn something and take note of the different provisions discussed herein. For your, I think, activity that you can do to assess yourself and to look into what I have discussed. Maybe you can try to look at your learning activity sheets, to the modules, the pivot leap, and even the national module. Try to look into the content. Is this module gender sensitive? Is this module use the gender equity? Is this gender inclusive? Try to look and critique and assess the learning materials that we are doing. Or if not, you can plan you can make an action plan instituting or educating our parents in terms of child protection, in terms of protecting our women students, our women the pupils in our schools, and educating the parents, so that in turn what we are learning can be transferred to them. So these are different activities that you can do as an application for what I have discussed. So thank you so much for listening, and if you would like to learn other things, and in terms of legal basis, you can look deeply into other provisions which I have cited in this PowerPoint presentation and in this video lecture. So thank you so much. God bless, and I'm hoping that we can go over with this pandemic and be safe always. God bless. Thank you.